Oh,
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I did 2 maritime tours, 2 AW tours, and did the OCU a total of 5 times, and wound up with about 5,500 hours on the things. It was an aeroplane I very much enjoyed. I mean, so you could do all sorts of things with it. I was the display pilot for a few years. You could go around to the air shows, and as long as you didn't follow a Harrier, a Lightning, or a Vulcan, you could actually sort of make the crowd sit up. Yeah. The round the world trip was good fun. The trip down to New Zealand in 1970 was also very good fun. I certainly enjoyed that. Getting an ACAT on type, which was very gratifying. I had a couple of double engine failures. One in the Gulf, and we had on a Mark III. The Mark III had 6 engines, had 2 Vipers in the outboard nacelles. I don't know whether you're aware of.
No.
Yeah, the Mark III was the Shackleton started off with a design max all-up weight of 72,000 pounds, which had increased to about 80,000 by the time the first one flew. The addition of all sorts of equipment and the various changes they made on the Mark III, particularly with the nose-wheel undercarriage, which was much heavier, raised the weight to 108,000 pounds. So that was a 50% increase in weight. And because they got bigger auxiliary gearboxes on the engines, the actual engine power was reduced by about 40 horsepower per engine. So if you were in this and you had an engine failure after takeoff at max takeoff weight, then the only way you were going was down. So their airships eventually recognised this, and they devised this modification, which involved putting 2 Viper engines into the outboard nacelles, running on petrol, which was unusual. I mean, they didn't normally run jet engines on petrol because obviously it burns a lot hotter. In fact, the standard Jet Provost engine produced 2,500 pounds of thrust, and they increased the jet flight temperature limit by 100 degrees, from 770 to 780 degrees, and you were allowed a maximum originally of 5 minutes per engine. Well, that as the installation became more proven, we were allowed to run them more and more, and eventually, because they were having major problems with the Griffon engine serviceability, which is another story, they wanted us to run the Griffons at above 2,000 RPM, and if the weight of the aircraft dictated that you needed to, then you had to light a Viper engine. Of course, the fuel consumption went way up, so your endurance went down from about a standard in a Mark III 16, 17 hours or so, down to about 9 or 10, which is quite a big drop. But I had a double engine failure out of Sharjah when we had 15 concrete 1,000 pound bombs on board, which I threw away in the desert, and I kept both the Vipers running. It was very hot, kept both the Vipers running till we touched down. So that was an interesting little 15 minutes or so. And then I had another incident in Cyprus when they used to change the radiators every so many hundred hours because they got clogged up. Anyway, the ground crew changed the radiators, and then needed an air test to make sure everything was working properly. And they changed the numbers 3 and 4 engines, which coincidentally provided all the hydraulic power for the aircraft. Anyway, I got airborne, and just as I was on rotate, the engineer announced that number 3 rad temp was out of limits. So I said to the co-pilot, shut it down, and turned around into the circuit with the intention of doing the circuit landing. And the engineer then announced in a voice about 3 octaves higher that number 4 rad temp was out of limits as well. By which time I got sort of 90 degrees into the turn. And fortunately it was a quiet day, and all I did was reverse the turn and land back the way I'd taken off. There was no wind of any real proportions at all. Having got the gear up, we had to blow it down with the emergency air, and also try and get the flap down with the emergency air. Anyway, we landed successfully, troubled to a halt off the far end of the runway, but of course with no power on one side you can't taxi, so we shut it down, and the rear crew got out and changed, and we wouldn't have a beer.